You ever smell something sweet, like warm halva, in the middle of the night when no one's cooking and no windows are open? That's what people say happens on a quiet street in downtown Washington, D.C., where an old shrine stands right in the middle of the road. Bulldozers broke down. Jackhammers shattered. No one could move that grave, and inside, they say, lies the body of a young woman who died in agony more than a century ago, yet never found peace. Some say if you pass by after midnight, you'll see her silhouette through the window holding a copper plate, her face hidden in shadow. Others say all you'll smell is halva. If chilling true stories like this fascinate you, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps me keep uncovering these forgotten horrors. Now let me tell you the full story from the very beginning. There's a street in the oldest part of Washington where the city's noise fades and the streetlights flicker against weathered brick. In the middle of that narrow road stands a small white tomb. Locals call it the Shrine of the Kindly Lady, but few know the truth behind its stories of betrayal, faith, and a mercy that turned into a curse. Her name was Helen Grace. She was born to a poor family on the outskirts of town, her mother dying when she was still a child, and her father following soon after. Orphaned, fragile but kind, she was taken in by distant relatives who treated her less like family and more like a burden. By 13, she was sent to work as a maid in a wealthy household, a grand, stone-built mansion on a hill where crystal chandeliers glittered over marble floors. But for Helen, it was no paradise. The lady of the house, Mrs. Davenport, was known for her cruelty. She demanded perfection in every task, her voice slicing through the halls like a blade. Helen scrubbed floors until her hands cracked, carried heavy copper pots, fetched ice water from the well in winter, and slept on cold stone at night. The servants pitied her, but no one dared to defend her. She ate whatever scraps were left behind, and when caught, was punished. Yet, even through all this, Helen never cursed anyone. Her eyes still carried that quiet, saint-like patience that made others uneasy. Mrs. Davenport couldn't stand it. The girl's beauty, her calmness had burned her with jealousy. Some nights, she'd yank Helen's hair, shove her to the ground, or force her to stand barefoot on the freezing veranda. And when rage wasn't enough, she'd whisper from behind a locked door, "Maybe the devils will take you tonight. Save me the trouble." Helen would curl up in a corner, trembling, whispering prayers through tears. But sometimes, she heard things in the dark, footsteps that weren't hers, a man's low voice muttering in a language she couldn't understand, a shadow moving along the wall, tall and slow, even though the lamp was still. She'd shut her eyes and whisper, "Lord, grant me patience." Still, strange things began happening around her. Late at night, other maids swore they saw a faint light under her door and smelled something sweet, like freshly made halva. Some said it was their imagination. Others began calling her the Blessed One, saying maybe God himself had placed a mark on her. But the more people whispered, the more Mrs. Davenport's hatred grew. When her husband left on a long pilgrimage, her cruelty turned to madness. And it was then that the first miracle happened. Mr. Davenport was away on pilgrimage for months. Without him, the mansion turned cold, heavy with silence and cruelty. Mrs. Davenport's rage had no limits now. Every breath Helen took seemed to offend her. Every movement was a sin. "Useless girl," she'd shout. "You'll never be anything but a burden." One evening, the house filled with the smell of butter and sugar. Mrs. Davenport stormed into the kitchen. "Make halva," she demanded. My husband loved it. I want it perfect. Helen said nothing, just tied her hair back and lit the stove. The copper pot glowed red in the firelight, sugar melting, butter sizzling. The air grew thick and hot. Steam rose to the ceiling, carrying that sweet smell that somehow made the room feel darker. Mrs. Davenport watched her stir. "My husband loved this," she muttered. "Too bad he's not here to taste it." Then something strange happened. Helen set the wooden spoon down, her eyes calm and still. She looked up and said softly, "I've already taken it to him." The kitchen went silent. The maids froze, their hands trembling. Mrs. Davenport's face twisted. "What did you say?" "I said," Helen repeated, "I already took him the halva." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Mrs. Davenport laughed, harsh and loud. "You stupid little liar. My husband's thousands of miles away. You think you can trick me with ghost stories." But Helen didn't move. Her eyes looked almost far away. A chill passed through the kitchen. The fire flickered low. Someone whispered a prayer under their breath. Days turned into weeks. Mr. Davenport finally returned from his pilgrimage, weak but alive. When he arrived, the entire household gathered to greet him. He stepped inside, smiling faintly, and held up a small copper plate in his hands. Inside it was a piece of halva. "I was resting on the road," he said, "when a young girl appeared. She handed me this and said, 'Give my regards to your wife.' Then she disappeared." The maids gasped. The copper plate was the same as the one from the kitchen. The smell of halva filled the room again, thick and heavy, like something holy or cursed. From that day on, everyone whispered that Helen Grace was touched by heaven, that she could send gifts across worlds, that she could see what others could not. But not everyone felt awe. Mrs. Davenport's envy twisted into something darker. She couldn't stand the way people spoke about the girl, the way her name made others lower their voices in reverence. So she swore she would break her. From that night forward, Helen's suffering became relentless. She was locked in her room for days without food, forced to carry boiling water that never burned her. Once, Mrs. Davenport tried to strike her with a knife, and the blade froze in the air. Refusing to move, the servants whispered now with fear, not admiration. They said the girl's prayers summoned voices in the dark, deep, echoing tones that filled her room at night. They said sometimes the smell of halva wafted through the halls, even when no one was cooking. And Mrs. Davenport, she began to lose sleep. Every night she woke, drenched in sweat, hearing faint footsteps in the corridor. A soft voice, almost singing, "I've already taken it to him." She prayed, she screamed, but it didn't stop. Until one night, she decided to end it. That night, the mansion felt colder than usual. Rain beat against the windows, thunder rolled over the city, and the servants whispered prayers in the dark. Everyone could sense something terrible was about to happen. Helen sat alone in her locked room, her small hands folded in prayer. Her candle had burned low, and the wax dripped slowly onto the floor like tears. Outside, Mrs. Davenport was pacing her heels, tapping on the marble. Her eyes wild and sleepless. "She's mocking me," the woman muttered to herself. Everyone talks about her, praises her. My husband, my servants, even the neighbors. That little witch thinks she's holy. She reached for a key hanging by the wall. When the clock struck midnight, she opened Helen's door. What happened next no one saw clearly, but the servants heard it all. A scream that tore through the mansion. A heavy crash. A woman's voice shouting, "Say it again. Say it now," and then silence. By dawn, the house smelled of iron and smoke. When the servants finally dared to open the door, they found Helen lying on the floor, her white dress soaked in blood. Her eyes were half open, her lips still curved into a faint, peaceful smile. They buried her in a small chapel beside the mansion's courtyard. Mrs. Davenport insisted the ceremony be done quickly. No priest, no flowers. She said it was for the best, but she never explained why her hands trembled the entire time. That night, she didn't sleep. At first, it was the smell that woke her, a sweet, heavy scent that filled the room. Then came the whisper, "I've already taken it to him." Her heart stopped. She sat up in bed, shaking. The room was empty, but the air felt dense, thick as syrup. She reached for the candle and froze in the mirror across the room. She saw Helen standing behind her, smiling, holding that same copper plate. Mrs. Davenport screamed and the candle went out. For the next several nights, the mansion echoed with noises, soft footsteps in the halls, doors creaking open, a faint, childlike humming that stopped only when someone spoke Helen's name. Some servants fled, others refused to go near the kitchen ever again. But the sweetest, strangest thing of all was that smell. Every night at exactly 3 in the morning, the scent of halva drifted through the house. No matter how tightly the windows were shut, days turned into weeks, and the Davenport mansion began to rot from the inside out. No one could sleep there anymore. Each night, the air turned cold and heavy, and that same sweet scent, halva butter, sugar, crept through the halls like a ghost. Mrs. Davenport's sanity began to crumble. She'd wake up screaming, swearing she felt someone standing at the foot of her bed. Sometimes she'd find copper-colored stains on her hands, even though she hadn't touched the kitchen in weeks. And sometimes, when she looked into the mirror, she'd see that same pale face again smiling faintly behind her shoulder. The servants left, one by one, whispering prayers as they went. By the end of the month, the mansion stood almost empty. Only Mrs. Davenport and her nightmares remained. The neighbors said she began talking to her, arguing with someone who wasn't there. At night, people walking past the house claimed to hear metal scraping against stone, like a spoon dragging slowly across a copper plate. Then came the screams. By the time anyone dared to enter, Mrs. Davenport was gone. All they found was a half-eaten piece of halva, sitting neatly on her nightstand. Years passed. The mansion changed hands several times, then burned down in an unexplained fire. All that survived was the small chapel where Helen had been buried. When the city decided to rebuild the street, construction workers were ordered to relocate the graves. They started with Helen's. The first worker raised his pickaxe and the handle split clean in two. The second tried a steel hammer, but the head snapped off on impact. Then they brought in a bulldozer. The engine roared, the machine moved forward, and the moment its blade touched the tombstone, Every light in the street went out. When power returned, the bulldozer's teeth were shattered like glass. And the driver, he swore he saw a woman standing in front of the tomb barefoot, in a white dress holding a copper plate in her hands. After that, no one tried again. City officials rerouted the road, paving around the grave. And so, right in the middle of the street, surrounded by asphalt and traffic, stands the small marble shrine of Helen Grace, the kindly lady, as people call her. But those who know the story never say her name out loud after dark. They say if you pass the tomb around midnight, you might see a flicker of light through the tiny window. Sometimes a shadow moves. Sometimes a sweet scent drifts through the air. And if you listen closely enough, just before dawn, you might hear her voice, "I've already taken it to him." Even now, decades later, people still talk about the shrine that stands alone in the middle of that Washington street. Cars slow down when they pass it. Pedestrians cross to the other side without realizing why. And every so often, someone swears they smell it again. That same warm, buttery scent of halva floating through the night air. One winter evening, a taxi driver named Mark was waiting by the curb just across from the shrine. It was past 3 in the morning. The streets were empty. He leaned back in his seat, half asleep, when he saw her. A young woman in a white dress stood by the tomb, her hair falling loose over her shoulders. She looked pale, almost glowing under the streetlight. And she was holding something, a small copper plate. Mark thought she might be lost. He turned on his headlights and rolled the window down. "Miss, do you need a ride?" he called out. The woman didn't answer. She just raised the plate slowly, as if showing it to him. For a split second, he saw it clearly, a piece of halva resting in the middle, steam rising off it even though the air was freezing. He blinked, and she was gone. Mark's heart was pounding. He jumped out of the car, looked around, nothing. But when he got back inside, the entire taxi was filled with that sweet, heavy smell. It lingered until sunrise, and Mark, he never worked that route again. Other stories spread to. A young man once walked past the shrine after a few drinks with friends. He laughed and shouted, "What kind of idiot believes in ghost stories like this?" That night, he dreamed of his wife standing over him with a knife. Her eyes black, her voice whispering, "I've already taken it to him." When he woke, a long, thin scratch ran across his chest. No one ever found an explanation. Now, whenever locals pass that shrine, they lower their voices. Mothers tell their kids to hold their breath until they've walked past. And those who live nearby still close their windows at midnight, not because they fear what they'll see, but because of what they might smell, because everyone in that neighborhood knows the same truth. The kindly lady isn't gone. She's waiting, patient, silent, still holding that copper plate in her hands. And if you ever walk that street late at night, you might hear her whisper, "I've already taken it to him."